The rain began in the late afternoon and continued into the evening, steady and unhurried as if it had nowhere else to be. Eleanor Whitmore sat on the edge of her narrow iron bed in the attic, listening to the soft tapping against the small window above her writing desk. The attic was simple and cold in winter, warm in summer, and far removed from the warmth and elegance of the rest of the house. From that window she could see only a strip of dull sky, the tops of brick chimneys, and the upper branches of an old elm tree that swayed in the wind. She often watched that tree for long stretches of time. It was one of the few living things she could see from her quiet corner of the world. Downstairs, life continued without her. That evening, like many others, carriages rolled into the courtyard. Doors opened. Guests stepped inside laughing, shaking off umbrellas, greeting Lady Agnes with polite smiles. Music floated up through the ceilings. Glasses clinked. Conversations rose and fell in waves. Eleanor knew the rhythm of these gatherings even though she had not attended one in years. Once she had stood at the center of such evenings, dressed in soft silk, listening to her father's proud introductions. Now she remained above it all, unseen and unmentioned. 3 years earlier, when her father, Sir Thomas Whitmore, died suddenly after a short illness, the house lost more than its master. It lost its balance. Sir Thomas had believed in Eleanor's education. He encouraged her to read widely, to think carefully, and to speak clearly. He valued her company and often asked her opinion on matters that surprised others. After his death, however, Lady Agnes slowly reshaped the household. At first it seemed harmless. Eleanor was told she needed rest. Grief, they said, had made her fragile. She was encouraged to spend more time alone. Invitations arrived addressed only to Lady Agnes. Friends stopped asking for Eleanor when their visits were gently redirected. Months passed, and small changes became permanent ones. Eleanor's portrait disappeared from the main hall. Her dresses were packed away and later donated. Her former bedroom was redecorated for guests. Eventually, she was moved to the attic for quiet and privacy. No arguments were raised. No harsh words were spoken. Everything was done politely, carefully, and with explanations that sounded reasonable. Yet the result was clear. Eleanor had been removed from sight. She was not locked away, but she was no longer part of the household's visible life. At first, loneliness weighed heavily on her. The silence felt endless. But instead of allowing her mind to grow bitter, she turned to writing. She wrote every morning at the small desk beneath the window. She wrote about her father's kindness, about the difference between protection and control, about how easy it is for a person to disappear without anyone admitting it. She wrote about the feeling of hearing laughter below while sitting alone above it. Her words were honest, calm, and thoughtful. Writing became her way of remaining present in a world that no longer called her name. One evening, while sorting through old papers and clothing to be sent away with charitable shipment, Eleanor slipped several folded pages into a trunk without much thought. They were drafts, she believed, unfinished reflections that would never be read. The trunk left the house the next morning. Weeks later, that same trunk was delivered the estate of Alexander Hawthorne, the Duke of Ravensmere. Alexander had been a close friend of Sir Thomas. He was known as a practical man, respected for his steady judgment and quiet leadership. While overseeing the sorting of donated goods, he discovered the folded letter tucked between garments. Curious about the careful handwriting, he read it. The words surprised him. They were not dramatic or self-pitying. They spoke plainly about isolation, dignity, and the quiet strength required to endure neglect without losing compassion. He recognized Sir Thomas's influence in the thoughtful tone. He also sensed that the writer was not weak, only unheard. Deeply moved, Alexander chose to reply. He wrote respectfully, acknowledging her reflections and introducing his own thoughts about responsibility and visibility. He made no assumptions and offered no pity. With the discreet help of Mary, a loyal maid who still remembered Eleanor's happier days, the reply reached the attic. Eleanor hesitated before opening it. She had not expected a response. As she read, her hands trembled, not from fear but from recognition. Someone had understood her words. Someone had answered thoughtfully. Thus began a steady exchange of letters. They wrote about books, about the pressures of managing expectations, about the strange loneliness that can exist even in large houses filled with people. Alexander spoke of balancing tradition with fairness in his estate. Eleanor shared ideas about education for village, children, and the quiet harm caused when voices are dismissed. Their correspondence grew deeper over time. Trust developed slowly but firmly. It was not built on fantasy but on shared understanding. After several months, Alexander proposed a meeting. He insisted it be proper and transparent, a conversation in the morning room, with the door left open in full daylight. Eleanor felt fear rise within her. She had not walked through the main corridors in years. She imagined the looks, the whispers. But she also understood that continuing to hide would only confirm the role she had been given. For the first time, she chose not comfort, but courage. On the morning of the meeting, she dressed simply but neatly. Each step down the staircase felt unfamiliar. The house seemed both known and distant. When she entered the morning room, Alexander stood immediately. His expression showed respect, not surprise. Their conversation flowed naturally, as if the months of letters had already bridged the distance between them. The calm was soon interrupted by Lady Agnes, who entered the room sharply, her surprise quickly turning to tension. For a moment, silence hung heavy. In the past, Eleanor would have lowered her gaze. This time she did not. She spoke calmly, explaining that being hidden had not protected her reputation but had diminished her life. She spoke without anger, only clarity. Alexander then declared openly that he intended to court Eleanor with full honor and transparency. Confronted publicly, Lady Agnes could no longer disguise her actions as harmless caution. She admitted that fear of gossip and control over appearances had guided her decisions. That evening, during a small gathering, Eleanor walked down the grand staircase and entered the drawing room. Conversations paused. Guests turned. She stood straight, composed, and confident. For the first time in years, she occupied her rightful place. In the months that followed, Eleanor and Alexander worked together on projects that reflected their shared values. They established a public reading room in the village, offering access to books and lessons for families who could not afford private tutors. Eleanor attended social events again, speaking thoughtfully and earning quiet admiration. People noticed not only her grace but her strength. By winter, their engagement was formally announced. The news was received warmly, not as scandal, but as a natural outcome of mutual respect. On her wedding day, as she prepared to leave the house where she had once been hidden away, Eleanor paused to think of the attic room. She felt no bitterness. Those quiet years had shaped her patience and sharpened her voice. They had taught her that silence can either shrink a person or prepare them. What began as a forgotten letter had changed the direction of her life. Through honesty, courage, and the simple act of being heard, Eleanor stepped from invisibility into purpose. She did not become someone new. She became fully herself, visible, valued, and no longer alone.